Welcome to MSP 1337. I'm your host, Chris Johnson, a show dedicated to cybersecurity challenges, solutions, a journey together, not alone. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of MSP 1337. This week, we are fortunate to have Matt Lee in the home office. Matt, welcome to the show.
Man, I'm home. I got to spend about a week and a half home. That means I obviously got in a bike crash or two and
I see that.
ended up injuring myself. I did get to test some physics challenges while I was home. Like, can I ride directly into one of those flag signposts and will it look cool? It didn't look cool. I mean, unless you're thinking like Rob Dyrdek type cool of like on ridiculousness.
What's a flag sign pole?
You know those like the signs that are on like a pole that they're like a flag they flap in the wind. They're only 12 foot tall. They curve. I hit the flag and I was like, dude, this is gonna look so dope. It's gonna slide off me. You know what I hadn't thought about was I was sweaty and I was wearing suntan lotion. So like
you stuck to the
flag.
Just
stuck right to the flag, man. It took me down hard. I mean hard and instantaneously.
And the flag was still waving in the wind.
It didn't care. I flip it off every time I drive by it now.
Oh, that's
so yeah.
Did it get recorded on camera?
I wish. I'm not good enough to catch my dumb stuff on camera.
I feel like that's like on America's Funniest Home Videos, right? Like that's like the one where the guy on the motorbike rides between the two posts of the sign and it just takes him right at the helmet.
Yeah, just wham. No, it was so funny and so dumb. And what's funny is like I've talked to several people before that have thought about doing that and would have thought it went a very different way. And so they've at least learned through my failure, in that way.
Right. Like, maybe we should start with more of a lighter material, like maybe a cotton polyester feel.
At least don't be sweaty when you put your arms that hold the control mechanisms of your bicycle straight into something that might pull them to one direction or the other. It just slapped me down, man. It was great. Which is not what people are here to hear about, but that's, at least a good segue, I suppose.
That is, the things we assume can be our demise, right?
Well, I think that's... and there's also another parallel. Like, okay, so let's say I got injured, and I'll tell you another story. So I was on my bicycle one day, and I was heading into this pretty cool street that's well paved, and I was on the left lane with a truck in my right lane. One of the good things about being a fat guy that gets skinny that rides bicycles is you have a lot of power. And so my straight line acceleration off the line is pretty good. I can usually beat cars off the line for the first 200 yards or so, unless it's like a Tesla or performance vehicle. But the point being, so I was going to pass this truck, get in the right lane, and make him get in the left lane. Like that was my goal. I had this empty space, and I was going to be in the right lane. Anyways, so I punch it. And I get to about 26 miles an hour. At least that's what my GPS says before the impact. And my left foot slips out of the bicycle. It hits off the ground, and it kicks immediately between the front tire and the inside frame. Just instant stop of the front tire. It was worse than grabbing your brakes. I go flying with my right foot still attached to the bicycle.
Which means it's coming with you.
Oh, it's coming with me, bro. Yeah, that left foot's loose, but that right foot, she's not. And so I end up doing a roll, and I break my left collarbone. I'd been in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for about 4.5 years at that time, and so I just naturally rolled down my left arm, broke my left collarbone, which, by the way, I don't know that everybody is listening, not watching, but that's where you'll see my wounds are in this current case, is down the left arm. But anyways, I broke my collarbone. I had to go to the hospital. And we buy insurance for that, don't we, Chris? Right? We buy medical insurance to cover that. I get in. This guy puts a board underneath my arm and like pulls on my arm to spread out the bones so they can get a good picture of the break, which is probably one of the more excruciating things I can remember in my adult life. And then they send me a bill for $700 above what my insurance paid. Right. And it's one of those things where, but I paid for insurance. Why do I have a $700 bill? Why do I have a $500 bill? Why did I get this $2,000 worth of bills from these various functions from people? Chris, I thought I insured stuff. Doesn't that mean they take care of it all?
I mean, to be clear, why can't the amount of money that's paid to have insurance be all that I need to be paying?
Fair. Yeah. But my point is, if we make that corollary to cyber insurance, what I had to deal with in medical is co-insurance, various pricing agreements, unscrupulous business practices potentially on this side of the different various medical practices. But the point being is, like, I am not going to be made whole by insurance, and I can never wear an evening gown according to my whatever I do that deal with my bones, because now I have this doubled over collarbone that they've left here. Maybe there's
just curious. So. Did you have planned in your future to wear an evening gown?
It wasn't in the near future, but once he mentioned it, it felt like maybe it was a problem I'm missing somehow. But anyways,
right.
But my doctor
but goes, I'm still good with heels.
But you know what I mean is, like, they can't put the bone back together in the same way. I definitely still have a broken part of me, and I'm going to make the cyber corollary now, because people think about risk. And they talk about risk mitigation, they talk about risk avoidance, they talk about risk acceptance, and they talk about risk transference. And risk transference is usually this conversation of saying, like, I am going to go buy insurance so that if the cyber baddie things happen and I have challenges to my operations as a result, I shall be made whole. I think that's the topic I want to talk about today, Chris, is like, insurance does not make you whole. So I'll let you open your thoughts on it, and then I'll give you my thoughts on it. Remember, these are opinions, y'all, but my point is, let's talk about it, Chris. Does insurance reduce the risk to zero, and does it make you whole?
I think we're all pretty clear that there is no zero in dealing with risk. I think that's a myth, in my opinion. I think you can get close, maybe in some cases. Maybe there's some specific instances. Like, hey, if I close the business, then I have no risk with regards to the business, but I have other risks that have now been introduced.
Maybe financial obligations to that business,
right.
Things of that nature, or personal guarantorship.
So I think about insurance and risk management as two sides of the same coin in some respects. So insurance is your reactive.
Risk transference. Yeah.
And risk management is your proactive. So, like, in risk management, you might decide that there are things that you have that are risks that you're going today to put on the insurance column, because to do something beyond that is financially irresponsible for your business, right? As Phyllis Lee would say, if the effort to remediate is greater than the financial capability of your organization, you have to take into consideration, is that worth remediating, right? At least in the way that it's written. I think that there's another problem that comes into play when we aren't looking closely at insurance and risk management, especially together, is that insurance is very focused specifically on the financial side of things. Like, it doesn't have any other, like, it doesn't build a new building for you because you have it. It doesn't suddenly turn on a switch and says, okay, your server's back online. It only can give you the dollars, if you will, to help make those things happen. Similarly to your example with insurance, like the insurance policy that you had when you went in with a broken collarbone was not the doctor putting you back together, right? Like, that was how you afforded to have that. It may have
funded
happen.
it. Yes, it may have funded some large portion of that. Yeah, exactly.
And largely without insurance, you likely would have still had the procedure, but you would have had far more than the $700 to deal with on the other side of this.
10,000 something, I think is what the number was, right?
And I think that's where insurance is largely a problem for MSPs, is we look at, I have insurance for these things, but we don't take into consideration how much of those things does it actually help us address, so that I know, based on those things being put back together, what am I still on the hook for that I didn't consider before I bought into this policy at X dollars that was a super good deal? Or, what were the coverages in the areas that I need help with, that I truly understand what those pieces were? That for me is really a big part of it. And I think one of the things that we have to do a better job going forward, insurance is important. Insurance is great. Don't get me wrong. Sure. But on the risk management side, the proactive approach to, don't want to be right of boom when things happen or as much as possible, right? Like, what if, Matt, when you were riding your bicycle, you had worn the inflatable Nerf whatever so that you didn't ever have to roll, right? Like, and you'd been like, well, yeah, that costs too much, right? Like, or maybe along those lines. I think that's where we are today, is we are at a crux between understanding how much we should spend on insurance, and in the MSP world, and please correct me if I'm wrong, this is my opinion, MSPs largely do not want to talk about risk and risk management.
Yeah. Well, and I don't know to say want is the statement. I think I'd rather say it's a maturity curve. And I think getting to being able to talk about, like, even if you were just talking qualitative risk, where you're like, okay, what's the likelihood of this happening? What's the impact if it happens? What's the likelihood of this? Like, even if you're getting to just the simplest of risk management, risk discussion, right? And then now that you're at a risk number and you have a risk register and you're saying, okay, what do we do? Do we want to transfer this risk in some form by insuring it? Even then, to your point, like, what are you insuring? You're maybe increasing some pool of dollars, but does that dollars bring you back to whole? Do you have systems that can be brought back to whole? I think, wasn't it just recently we saw somebody that was closing down just because there literally was nothing left? They had nothing to recreate. The re-encryption didn't save them, or the disencryption didn't save them. But the point is, like, having insurance is necessary, just like having health insurance is necessary. I think to your point, your risk appetite has to be discussed, and I think MSPs are getting there. I think at the very core, they're starting to at least discuss this. And there is no risk when you talk about stopping it all, Chris. When you think about before people started to really understand the complexities of security, people would say things like, yeah, put on EDR. I got you. I stop all the threats. That's why we do the Sentinel-1. I mean, that was literally statements made in 2017, 2018. Like, those literally were statements made. When you think about what it takes to defend against a social engineering plus a ransomware attack, the layers are thick. It starts with identity. It starts with vulnerability management. It starts with patching, configuration management, identity management, extensibilities of principles of least privilege, and finding, like, there's so many things that need to be done. And so I think once they make that first transition to they being just the general practitioner space, and at least it's about themselves, and you've seen this transition with Trustmark. Maybe I'll ask you to think about this. How many Trustmark people that went through it the first year were talking about and thinking about risk versus how many now are talking about and thinking about risk? My gut says they have to be more to get through the Trustmark appropriately. They have to be able to start down the path of being able to talk about risk.
Ironically, Matt, it isn't necessarily thinking about risk more. It's about where is my risk? Where is the risk that I can have the most significant impact. Without significant cost?
Sure.
And I think you have to approach it a little bit
down for sure.
Well, so I think about things like, and we talk about this a lot in the MSP space, right? Like, so I'll give you an example. I'm a new level 3 engineer. I've just been hired by, whatever the MSP is. And I'm like, hey, so I want, hey, how come I don't have local admin rights to my machine? I need to install all this stuff. A very immature MSP would have probably already given them local admin rights. But as MSPs go through things like the Trustmark or CIS Top 18 and other frameworks, least privilege access isn't about not protecting the employee. It's about protecting the organization first, which can feasibly also protect the employee and clients and so on and so forth. But I think that's where things like risk management come into play. Is it's not about the individual. In fact, if you're a business owner and you're focused on how to, do things for yourself from a risk management standpoint, that's probably not always going to be in the best interest of your organization.
To unpack that part, but yeah.
At least not always.
Yeah, but let's focus on the point of, like, think about the business from a risk perspective, and back to the point of, like, MSPs talking about risk to their clients, but to themselves, and thinking about it in that perspective. I don't think they have. I think even when they approach standards, they've gotten to a point of, like, this is implemented, not like how mature is it, and how broadly implemented, and how deeply, and how well am I monitoring it, and how can I make sure it's going to happen when I turn my head and look somewhere else? Is it still going to happen this way? I think those are all very tactical and operational pieces. And I think risk conversations live in a strategic land. And maybe I'm wrong. This is just my musings. But I think when you think about strategic versus tactical versus operational, I think risk is a strategic decision. I'm making the strategic decision from a strategy of saying, I could ride into that sign and see what happens and have fun and look cool if it happens. But the risk is high because I could hurt myself. And the likelihood of me getting hurt is probably also fairly high. And that means I'm looking at 25, and I was wearing sunscreen, right? So that makes it now at 25. Like, would I say they're getting to that stage of being able to make and talk about those risks in ways that are healthy and usable going forward? I think not. But I think my point I was trying to make is those that have gone through the Trustmark have all the mechanics to do that.
Right. And they're recognizing that this isn't an individual choice. This is being made at the organizational level, right? So even if I'm the owner and I have the authority to make the decision, without buy-in from employees, it largely doesn't work.
Yeah. And this, somebody said this the other day too, a couple of points, right? Like, you're never done with security. You're never perfect. You're never at a point where everything's the way it has to be permanently. You can get to a place where you're happy with where you are and you're managing risk appropriately and you're making decisions based on the business's best outcome and what spend is versus what outcome is and what your ROI of things are and what that means, right? So I think that's a piece that you have to think about, is this never gets to like perfect.
But the changes in the organization that we often take for granted, right? So tomorrow's Tuesday or tomorrow's Wednesday, right? And if you think about tomorrow being Wednesday, well, what could happen on a Wednesday that didn't happen today? Well, I don't know. Wednesday's not here yet. And that can impact the things that you're doing from a process and procedure standpoint, whether or not it's covered in your policy, whether or not you have the right coverage in your insurance. So many things that I think this comes back to what I think is largely the checkbox mindset. Checkboxes, argue that it's done.
It's done.
Or at least it gets to be put away for another time in the future, right? I checked it off today. I know that I may have to look at this again in a year, but I don't have to look at it again tomorrow.
Right.
And I think when you go through the trust mark or you go through really any framework that you are serious about for your organization, not because you feel obligated to insure with a client to make them happy, and you're doing it for yourself, I believe you get into a space that says, in order to be resilient, I have to figure out how this gets woven into our culture, our strategy, our leaders, everything the governance of this organization has this as part of that stickiness. So tomorrow we're looking at this stuff again.
And I think that was what the other point and I was just talking to a chief trust officer about this, was that it's about giving the why. We so often just give the what or say this is going to happen, but it's about, now what if I go back to that technician and say, having local admin rights on the same account that you expose to the internet exposes you to a large amount of phishing, of access that'll give me larger access as a threat actor once I land. And we've decided that the best way to handle that is to remove local admin access and provide you the best and most usable method to get the things you need done. One of our security team members would be glad to help you as soon as you need anything, software installed. Please make sure, and we track this for the hours and how fast they're being responded to and how quickly, to ensure that we're serving you, our internal customer. Right? Like, which one of those gives you a better why and right than just saying I'm taking away local admin rights? And I think, anyways, getting off on a tangent.
I think it's not a tangent. The word why in this context is perhaps the most important of all of the things that you might do in any framework that you might approach. If why is not able to be defined, then you will not be long-term successful with it. I just don't think it's possible, because if there's no buy-in, that's where shadow IT comes into play. That's where, I'm not going to do it on my work computer. Then I'll do it on my personal computer.
And even when you've educated, sometimes it's outside of people's risk posture. What I mean by that is, like, think about wearing a seatbelt. Everybody's educated. Seatbelts save lives. Like, there's huge campaigns. There's click it or ticket. You can get the punitive side of that if you don't have your seatbelt on. Your car freaking dings at you until you put the key or the seat in. In fact, if you weigh more than 50 pounds and you're in the right seat, it'll also ding at you and think you're.
Or if you're in a Tesla, the middle seat will set off because you're heavy enough to bleed into the middle seat.
Yeah. And so you have these challenges where, like, all of those things exist, and yet people still buy systems to turn off the ding. Car manufacturers still allow you to go in and programmatically sometimes turn off the ding for the seatbelt. People ride with that risk. And the risk reward calculation in that is not even measurable. How uncomfortable and how much of a loss of being belted in is worth to have your risk of going through the windshield and dying go up by an X-fold.
Well, and it's all tied to
Well,
and it's all tied to quantitative measurement, right? Because if you think about, like, cell phone laws, right? No touch cell phone law just went into effect here in Iowa. You know what it doesn't say? That you can't eat a burger from Burger King while you're driving.
Sure, fair. Which probably
mess with the radio, right?
But even then, think about the law and the way it was written. What is the risk reward of that? The likelihood that you're so engrossed in your burger and staring at every little mustard seed and every little tiny tomato seed that's in there and lettuce and how crisp it is near zero. The likelihood of you having your hand off is very, very, very low. but yet you'll still have to reach and eat and bite, and that takes some time. But my point is, think about it from a risk perspective. The likelihood of the crash happening by that is far higher, in my opinion, of a cell phone because of the level of engrossment in which the person is brought into, reading things, chatting, thinking about emotional responses to their email message, those kind of things. And so when you have that, I think if you thought about it, the state is kind of behaving in the right mechanism of where the risk reward is, placing a reward that allows people to not be fined, I suppose, only placing a punitive of people using their cell phone doesn't have to extend to burgers because burgers aren't the killer. It's cell phones. And so I know that's, you meant that to be hyperbole, but it's actually a great example in the effective risk strategy, in my opinion. Anyways.
My point was there are a lot of things. Yeah. I think there are a lot of things that are, tough to measure. Like if someone has little kids and they're constantly looking into the back seat, we know accidents have happened because of that. To your point, highlighting the cell phone one is because it's easy to quantify that one.
Yeah.
It's not as easy for some of these other ones. Absolutely.
More likely. Like it's just by my own, that's sometimes what I like, and maybe it doesn't make me right. I got accused of being a know-it-all yesterday, and it doesn't resonate with me. I actually think I ask a lot of questions of myself and others, but anyways, that's okay.
What is it, Sheldon from Big Bang Theory? He's like, I believe I'm familiar with everything.
I'm definitely not. But anyways, the point is it's the but sometimes problem.
Sure.
Right. There's another fellow, there's a Chicagoan called Technology Connections on YouTube that's just fantastic. If you haven't ever listened to his stuff, he's amazing. He's my spirit animal. But anyways, he's talking about how replacing traffic lights with LEDs has saved X amount of dollars. It's a massive difference in the infrastructural requirements and all those things. The replacement bulb time goes way down. The cost goes way down. The cost of implementation.
Sure.
He said, but there's people that fight it because they're like, but if it really snows, and sometimes at the right speed, that will get covered, and the incandescents won't be there to warm that up, and therefore you'll have to heat that manually, and that heating manually will be just as much of a problem. The incandescent was a better option, right? And he's like, that's the but sometimes argument, right? But sometimes you'll have a 47-degree wind with the right, but it's like 1%. But what I mean is, think about it as a practitioner. In my mind, thinking about the impacts of how many people die because they're eating a burger or looking back at their kids by the just broad thought process of how many times you've seen some jackass driver pull over in your lane because she or he were looking down at their cell phone in a modern enough car that they didn't need to do that. They absolutely could just connect and talk to whoever they're talking to, but they don't want to do that. They want to text. All right, I'm feeling like old man yells at cloud here.
I think it's an interesting point on the LED lights. Just because spending enough time as I did installing cameras, indoor cameras versus outdoor cameras. Indoor cameras don't need heating elements to ensure that there's no ice on the camera dome, right? But the cost difference of that indoor and outdoor camera got to the point that within the 4 or 5 years that I was doing cameras pretty regularly, that the camera cost started to equal out, where cameras were no longer called outdoor versus indoor. They were just called indoor-outdoor cameras. So I would argue that on the traffic lights, for heating them up, if warming based on the location needs to happen, the cost is still cheaper than putting in incandescent bulbs.
Oh, 100%. Well, and that was his argument too, right?
Yeah.
And it was 100%, and his argument as well. But the point being is, when we think about analyzing a control or something you need to do or something you found that's out of what you had expected in your compliance policy or the way you've approached your controls and your security process, I think using judgment of what is the best impact for the least amount of cost, right? Whether that be human cost, capital cost, personal cost, governance cost, all the things. And I think doing that and using that as a risk management, what's my biggest bang for the buck, is such pragmatic advice. And you gave that a while back earlier, but I think, we got off the topic of insurability a little bit in this, and I wanted to come back to, talking about insurance challenges and what the kind of death is from insurance and what I think people need to be aware of. And I think that is don't lie, first and foremost. When you fill out your cyber insurance form, don't lie. I think when they ask you granular questions that are, or binary questions that are not binary questions, then expand upon that and speak towards those things. Do you have MFA everywhere? Yeah, except for these 9 that don't have it because they don't offer it, and these are the things, these kind of data, that's whatever it may be. So I think the point is don't lie by omission, because I would be worried about rescission. And you've already seen it play out with Travelers versus ICS, right, in 2022, of rescinding a policy because of material omissions on the application form. So you can't transfer it to a rubber wall. The ball may bounce back and hit you. Right. So that's the first one.
It's funny you say that. I was recently hiking and I thought it'd be really funny because it was very steep to throw a super ball and not try to bounce it hard on the ground.
Yeah,
but
just
like,
give it the gravity from its potential energy now. Yeah.
And then watch it, see how high it would bounce back up because I could see very far into the distance.
Sure.
I was just curious, like how high would that ball come back up? And I realized probably not very high. There's a reason why people slam those balls down is to get to do more.
Well, it depends on what its terminal velocity would be, right? And did it reach its terminal velocity? And what is its energy at terminal velocity? What's the moment of impact? What is the rebound coming back? I'm not sure of that mathematical calculation, but I bet AI would tell me pretty quick. But you could figure this out, Chris. I would wager this is a very easy math problem. Probably not even calculus, just straight up trig. I think you get some cosines in there.
I mean, you just used words that my calculator. I'd have to read the manual on the calculator to figure that out.
But I would bet. With that ball in a spherical surface and it's fairly dense, it has a pretty good terminal velocity. Like I think depending on how far. Anyways, fair. I thought of this because I hit a golf ball, and it was one of these courses. And it was in Georgia somewhere. And anyways, I hit this golf ball. It was off the 200-foot cliff down like 100 yards away. Or it's 400 yards away, but you're hitting a sand wedge, right? Because it's got so much carry and distance down that like any forward trajectory is a long way. Anyways, it's fun. But I hit a rock, and it came like way back up, and I was like, "Holy crap!" That was like a good amount of bounce right there, bro. Anyways, but I digress.
So we've got a few minutes left, and I think we've done a good job of setting the stage around the things that you need to be concerned about. Like obviously insurance does not solve your problems. It
makes you more financially offset. Correct.
Yeah. So what would you consider from a guidance standpoint the approach to take for, like, this is not getting into like I'm an insurance agent kind of thing. I don't want to ever claim that, but like I don't know that insurance agents put a lot of time and energy into, hey, Matt, let's sit down and evaluate what are the areas of coverage that are most important to your MSP. But as an MSP, you should be able to go in and sit down and go, hey, I know in these 10 categories, these are important. And then allow an agent to basically give you some feedback around those are the important areas. Let's see if we can't come up with a structured policy that makes sense for you.
Well, and cyber insurance in general has just now gotten to, in my opinion, any degree of an understanding of actuarial basis. I think there's been like such a maturation curve for cyber, and still in it for all of us. But I think there's been such a maturation curve for cyber insurance because they take things so granular or so binarily of, do you have MFA? There might be 95 places I need MFA that have data that has some value to us, like that could be impacted by us. But how many of them are yes or no? They're not asking those questions. They're just asking general questions like that. So that data is getting better and they're getting down that road. But what are some things that I would think of is like, as the insurance and actuarial stuff gets better and the agents themselves get better at explaining cyber. Like I remember the first time I called in to execute a cyber policy in 2016 or so. And it's like, can you talk to me about cyber claims? And they're like, we don't even know what to do, bro. Like, we don't know. We're gonna have to look it up. We're gonna have to figure it out. Now they've been through it enough that they know what that looks like and what the claim process looks like, what the injury looks like. You know, I was a life insurance salesperson for a while there, you know, as part of my financial services duties. And when I had to deliver that first policy, it was the first time you realize people don't want the check. They want their husband back. Right? And the suffering doesn't go away because of the check. In fact, the check's almost an insult at that moment. While it's meant to be beneficial, it is. It's just like,
sure.
Yeah. So you have that challenge. And so I think like more and more of the people in insurance that have gotten to experience those emotions will have more of an understanding of that, will understand the product deeper, will understand where it didn't pay. Like in my example, I had first-party payments weren't allowed, but the third-party were in certain capacitance and all of these things. And had we known that, we would have been able to apply that better and be more whole. Instead, we had a $1.28 million claim that $280,000 or so was paid up. And so it's like, will they get better? I think the insurance companies will get better actuarially. And I think they'll get better at explaining to people the coverage. Like, no, that goes to your E&O if you cause this, even in this type of negligence. And this goes to your traditional cyber insurance. And this is your ransomware. Like, I think they're going to get better at that. And then that means they'll get better at crafting policies. I don't think MSPs know what to ask of what kind of coverage you would need until you've been through it. I don't think you know what to ask. Like, Hey, by the way, will panel be assigned? Can I use external panel? How long do I have to wait for panel? What is the timeline of management? When do I need to notify? Like all of those things, that's just the tactical pieces, like literally not even like getting into the strategic and what should I be covering and what kind of coverages do I need, those kind of things.
But again, I think to some extent, and the trust mark is a great place to help with this, right? Is like, because you're walking through these domains, you're getting some information to help with those decisions.
Yeah.
But I think about
you're getting more context of what it takes to protect and where you're at. I don't know that you're getting more context of what kind of bills will be due, what kind of thing will I have to wait on when I deal with an incident. I don't know that one. Does that make sense? Like in my opinion.
And that might be more of like knowing of cases that are out there that might be a similar sized organization. Like, how much money will I expect to spend on PR? I don't know, because the incident hasn't happened.
And what about cash flow? And how do I manage the fact that I have to make these ransom payments myself first if I'm going to pay them, and then they'll make me whole? And do I have a credit card that'll even do $64,000 in Bitcoin for me? Or like those questions arise. Ask me how I know. Like it's
right. Yeah. Just because the card can doesn't mean it will when you go to use it.
Played that game too, actually. Had the fraud department get involved pretty quick with one of our Marriott cards. I'll be candid about this. I think we had to pay 6 ransoms in our mass ransom event of all the clients. So it was like 6/30ths or something of the clients, and a couple were the same ransom key for one server. Was 2 of them for like $25,000. That was back when they were cheap. But in that paying of those ransoms, like we had to go buy, Bitcoin with a credit card ourselves or bank account, which we preferred to get the Marriott points at that time, and then use those to pay the ransom for those things. And that was only after the insurance said, yes, we'll pay this. They're not on the sanctions list. We've done the negotiation. This is the number. Here's what you're gonna have to pay. So like, I didn't mean to go off on that tangent, but that's just one of many of those kind of like cash flow challenge events that are going to start playing out, that you don't know when that's going to be made whole. How long is it going to be before the insurance starts wiring you that money back on those things? What are they like? Is it E&O? Are those the same carrier? To your point, I think that you got to get in, like, in my opinion, I think they'd have to be the same carrier. You want it to be the same carrier in the bucket for all of it, in my thought. That's my thought. I might be wrong, but they can go reinsure it on the back end. But
I didn't realize that the Admiral status with Marriott was tied to, they had to create that status because of how many points you earned.
Shut up. It wasn't me, man. It wasn't me. Those were all Chris's points at the time. But dude, I'm telling you, I can't even imagine what those Marriott points were. I don't know if you got multipliers for dollars on Bitcoin though. So I think you're probably limited.
Well, I do know that the higher your status is with Marriott, the more points you earn for the dollar you spend.
Oh, okay. Well, then maybe Chris did pretty good on that. I mean, Chris was doing pretty good.
Who knows? Maybe he's still living off of.
Dude, it was wild times, man. But I think the other thing I wanted to focus on is, insurance. We talked about, like, don't lie to insurance. When you're dealing with insurance, no, it doesn't make you fully whole. The other pieces we covered were, hey, when you're dealing with insurance, ask them to explain each component and what it covers. What are your first party options? What are first payment? Who's going to get paid and for what and what level? And
they also don't want to know what your profit is. They want to know what your revenue is.
That's fair. But the other thing I think is when you're thinking about insurance and sustainability of insurance, like, I would really, if I'm dealing with an insurance provider, I'd want to know about what their IR process looks like. Right. Mm-hmm. And I know we want to talk about being more left of boom rather than more right of boom. But when we're talking about right of boom, it's really helpful to know what that's going to look like when you get right of boom. Like, do I just call and I'm going to have a counsel assigned right away? Do I bring my attorney? How quickly? What about panel? Can I pay for something? If I have a small business email compromise, can I go ahead and pay the $2,000 for an automated platform to do its breach investigation of the incident and determine what they think happened and provide the evidence and forensics, since that's so normalized? And will I get compensated for that if I do so? Will I not? Right? Those are the kind of the questions I'd want to know. And then what does it look like when going through an incident? What are my notification timeline requirements for you about a potential event that might be material as an incident? What does that look like in that regard? And there's just so many questions from an insurance perspective that I want to know from an operations perspective to ensure that I definitely can continue moving forward operationally. Because that's what I see a lot of MSPs dealing with. I was just in a chat yesterday, you were in the same chat, where they were talking about how they'd waited, I think, 4 days or 3 days or something for the insurance company to provide, even though the people that could do the IR and the defer were on their panel. They were afraid to go spend money with that company and not know if the insurance was going to cover it because they weren't the one that actually assigned that panel, instead if they reached out directly. So they just sat there and waited for days. waited for just days for the insurance company to come back and say, hey, okay, yep, no, we're gonna move forward. You can use that company. And they ended up not waiting. They just went ahead and paid the company, and they said, we'll see if insurance will cover me. So now you're in this like place of like cash flow, uncertainty, speed, time to operations.
Sure.
Those are left of boom decisions. Like being able to be resilient and have a plan that allows me to spin up in an isolated space and get operational needs for my world. And this is how we're going to operate. Thinking about those things in advance, those would be real valuable. And we're seeing vendors go through this right now in our space, right? That are not able to operate, large vendors. And it's thinking about, and I don't want to cast shade because we could go through the same thing. I could go through the same thing. You could go through the same thing. We all could be victims. But I am saying, like, in my mind, I would try to look left of boom as much as possible and apply frameworks deeper, broader, more impactful, and continue iterating upon those, to your point. So,
yeah, know the stakes, right? So with that, this has been an episode of MSP 1337. Thanks, and have a great week.